I've been asked recently about how I like to work with audio when video editing, particularly in two scenarios. One is an interview that's in a really high noise environment, a conference lobby or a factory, something like that. And the other is, how do I smooth out the audio so it's not so jarring every time you make an edit? Not just in setting the levels, but to maybe foreshadow an edit or just kind of make it feel like it fits together a little bit better. Today, I'm using Premiere, but really, this could be any tool. It really doesn't matter what platform you're using. It's all about the application. It's more than just setting your levels. It's understanding how to use crossfades and how to foreshadow something by smoothing out your audio and guiding your viewer through the experience. So let's get started. So here's the scenario. We've got two sound bites. Here's the first one.
Water is life.
And you'll hear that she's in a really noisy environment.
Everything that we do.
And it also ends abruptly. And we want to be able to smooth out the end of that edit.
For everything that we do.
The reason why that's so abrupt is that she starts her next word in the middle.
That we do,
like I mean. We're going to try and get rid of the end of that elegantly. We also have a second soundbite here.
Water is important to every single human being, like regardless of where they are and who they are, it's important that we have access to water.
And you can hear that there's a lot of chaos in the background. There's a lot of background noise. We need to figure out a way to make really close edits. And that's why we tend to record room tone. Unfortunately, with this interview, no room tone. I need to dig through the interview to be able to find a little space before the reporter or producer asks a question and after someone is finished. And I've dug through this interview and I've looked, and there's just a lot of talking, but not a lot of spaces. And eventually I found a little tiny piece of audio in here.
How much water they were actually using in their lives. So.
What happens next?
So there's just that little... There's that little space in there. So I can lift this little piece of audio right in here, and I'm going to use this as almost a band-aid, a way to get from out of one edit and into the next. So I'm going to take this little piece of sound, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go back to my two sound bites up here. I'm going to just paste this little piece of sound in between. It almost sounds good.
We do everything that we do.
It's still a little abrupt, and so we can use a crossfade in here using this background sound. It won't be identical to the background sound. It's not going to match perfectly, but it's going to get rid of the sudden absence of sound, so that when we make the edit, there's still this noise floor of what was going on in the environment. I've taken this little piece of sound and I'm going to use an audio crossfade, and I'm going to place it right over this edit. Now, I have set my settings for the crossfade to be short, 2 frames long. It may come in initially, depending upon what your defaults are, at 20 frames or 30 frames. Using my preferences, I made it 2 frames long because that's a really good starting point. And I can hear what we do, but it kind of shortens her just a little bit too much. So instead, I'm going to make it a 1 frame crossfade, and I'm going to move it forward and backwards until it sounds a little better. And maybe I'll do it on the back end. Probably the front end was better. And so now I've got an edit that...
It's important for everything that we do.
And I've got this little piece of pad. It's not very long. It's only 23 frames long, but it gives me enough space to be able to have something to work with, in essence, take a breath before her next soundbite. I'll take it down here, and now by sliding the second bite up,
it's important for everything that we do. Water is important.
I now have something that sounds a little more natural. The sound bites aren't too slammed together, and I don't have the noise floor just suddenly disappearing.
We do. Water is important.
And again, I can add a crossfade in here if I feel it's too abrupt.
Water is important.
And now I've got a much, much smoother edit.
That we do. Water is important.
So we've got jump cuts and we need to cover it. So we've got some cover footage in here. And if we listen to it, this applause starts in the middle of the applause and arbitrarily just cuts out. We also have a second problem, and that is the audio is only recorded on channel 1. I need to, first of all, in my audio effects, I need to fill the right channel, channel 2, with the sound from channel 1. So I need to fill the right with left. And fill right with left. And now when I play it, you can see on the view meter over here that both channels are moving equally, where on the second clip, which I've not added the effect, you'll see that the sound is only on channel 1. So I'll need to fill the right with left on that one. Well, that audio is very loud. In fact, if I take these clips and just lay them over the top,
It's the sustenance. It's important for everything that we do.
you can't hear anymore because the background sound is too loud. So I can adjust the audio level by having the track expanded, and the way that we see the graphs, the waveforms, is by expanding the track. That expansion gives you the ability to adjust the volume here. And because this is really loud, I'm going to take it down to, like, I don't know, let's start at like -22.
For everything that we do, water is important
Might
to
be a
every
little
single human being.
too quiet. That audio is also going to be too loud. So let's drop it down to about -15. And then
Of where they are. And
again, background audio way too loud. And so let's bring it back down around -22 again. It's just a guess, but what I'm...
it's the sustenance. It's important for everything that we do. Water.
If I mute her audio and we just listen to the background sound, we can see it works okay. I may fine-tune the levels a little bit, but you can still hear a lot of jumping in the background sound. And it basically draws attention. And I often want the audio to foreshadow something that's going to come, about to happen. So I may start the audio before the video. That's called a split edit or an L cut. And with this applause, I may want the applause to start momentarily before we see the video. Well, if I try to do that in its current configuration, the audio and video are going at the same time. So I need to remove the linkage between the video and the audio. So by selecting the clip and right-clicking on it, I can unlink. So now they are, even though they're synchronous, they're independent files. And I can extend the audio out a little bit so that the audio starts before. The problem is that it's a little distracting. I'm going to bring her audio
It's the
back.
sustenance. It's important for everything that we
To have this sound that far ahead. And frankly, I'd like it to gradually come in. There are a couple of ways I can accomplish that. Probably the fastest way to accomplish that is to just simply add a crossfade at the beginning. But my crossfade default is only 2 frames. So by zooming in, I can now extend the length of the crossfade here so that
it's important for everything that we do. Water
the applause
is
sneaks in. And so in essence, this audio comes in slightly before we see the video, and it foreshadows. This is particularly helpful with like traffic noise or a siren or a factory, something that says we're about to change scenes.
important to every single human being.
But the applause in the background and all of this sound here is still a little jarring every time we make an edit. I will use a crossfade between these edits here. Again, I'll expand them out just a little so that
It's important to every single human.
and I'll mute her so you can hear what I'm doing. And I will often go through many of my background sounds and just add some crossfades, not overly long, but just enough to kind of smooth out the background so that the edits aren't as jarring, particularly when you've got radical changes in levels or significant changes in how the sound is interacting, what the sound levels are and what the business is going on. When you're working with audio, particularly an interview shot in such a chaotic environment, it's really important that you think about the way a viewer is going to listen to your story, not just see it. That means you're not only managing the levels, but you're managing how you blend from one shot to the next. You don't want them to notice every edit. When I do my final mix, I do listen off of speakers. I can understand wearing headphones, particularly if you don't want to disturb others, you're in the workplace, something like that. But for the final mix, you really need to emulate the way someone is going to watch the story. And that means listening off speakers, and I do at least one pass off of a computer to make certain that I'm hearing it through a computer speaker, be it a laptop or a desktop, something like that, so that I can make certain that all of the changes I've made and the adjustments I made are going to enhance the story, that my audio isn't going to get in the way of somebody engaging in the story and appreciating my narrative. Hopefully these simple tips are going to help you to tell better stories so that your viewer is paying attention to the content, not so much the editing.